My mom let her dog knock over my daughter, breaking her wrist. She needs to learn to stay out of the way, she said. My brother shrugged. She's clumsy anyway. I said nothing. Took my daughter to the hospital. For days later, I filed a report. Animal control took the dog, and my lawyer took over from there. That was the last time I ever left my daughter with my parents. Because of my mother's selfishness, she nearly lost her hair. Later all. It sounds dramatic, but that's how it went down. And I've gone over it in my head 1,000 times since, wondering how I didn't see it coming. My wife, Isabella, had always said my parents played favorites. I used to wave it off, say she was being sensitive, but I couldn't wave it off after what happened. Not after the way they treated Molly. Not after what they said. And not after the screaming match that ended with Isabella's fingers tangled in my mother's hair, pulling so hard the neighbors ran over thinking someone was being killed. It started when Isabella and I had to be away for work. Just 3 days. We both had back-to-back conferences, her in San Francisco, me in Atlanta. And since our schedules lined up perfectly, it felt efficient to leave Molly with my folks for a long weekend. They'd offered plenty of times. Said they missed having a little one around. Of course, spy little one. They really meant Brianna, my brother Greg's daughter. Brianna was the golden child. Loud, athletic, fearless, and everything they thought a granddaughter should be. Molly was quieter, more sensitive. She loved drawing and reading. She wasn't a crowd pleaser, and that made her invisible to them. Still, I thought it would be fine. A few days, nothing major. We dropped her off Friday afternoon. I kissed her goodbye. Promised we'd bring souvenirs. Molly clung to Isabella a little. Said she had a weird feeling. I should have listened. When we got back Sunday evening, the house was too quiet. No running to the door. No smile from my mom. Just the TV humming in the background and Greg yelling something from the kitchen. Then I saw Molly on the couch, pale and small, her left arm wrapped in a cast. Isabella dropped her suitcase and ran over. I didn't even get to ask what happened before my mom said too casually. She got knocked over by Max. She was standing in his way. Max, their 90 pounds golden retriever. We told them a dozen times to keep that dog away from Molly. He was never trained. Always jumping, barking, chasing kids. She needs to learn to stay out of the way. My mom added. Greg was leaning against the counter, not even pretending to care. He just shrugged and said, "She's clumsy anyway." I didn't say anything. Not yet. I picked Molly up gently, asked her if it hurt. She nodded, then said something I'll never forget. Grandma said it was my fault, and Brianna laughed. That's when Isabella lost it. She turned on my mother so fast no one could react. Screaming, cursing, hair pulling. I've never seen her that furious in my life. My dad jumped up from his recliner like he'd been shocked. Greg shouted something and within seconds it was chaos. Neighbors came to the door. One of them even stepped inside trying to break it up. Isabella was still yelling when I finally pulled her off my mom and got her outside. She was shaking, furious tears in her eyes. We drove straight to the hospital to get Molly checked again. I didn't say a word until we were halfway there. Then I looked at Isabella. This proves it. They never loved her. I said they only love Brianna. To them, Molly's just in the way. She didn't answer, just stared out the window, jaw clenched. But the next morning, I made a decision. I filed the report. Animal control took Max and I called my lawyer. By the time I filed the report, I wasn't even angry anymore. I was clear, cold, even. That's what happens when the people who are supposed to love your child treat her like a nuisance. You stop giving chances. You stop explaining. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to sue his own mother. But that's exactly what I did. For days after we got Molly back, animal control came first. Max, their overgrown, untrained golden retriever, was gone by lunchtime. I got a string of texts from my mother afterward. The first said I was heartless. The second accused Isabella of brainwashing me. The third was a screenshot of some quote about forgiveness. I didn't respond. Greg called that night. Said I was overreacting. That kid's fault. It happens. He asked what I was really trying to do. I said I wasn't trying to do anything. I was just done pretending. That's when he dropped the line that made my wife clench her jaw and walk out of the room. Come on, man. Molly's always been a little dramatic. Maybe she's milking it. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I hung up. The next day, Molly told us more. She sat between us on the couch, her wrist in a fresh, hard cast, her voice soft but steady. She said Grandma made her eat alone at the little table in the laundry room because Brianna wanted the dining room to herself. She said Grandpa told her not to touch the TV remote because smart girls don't watch cartoons. She said Brianna shoved her in the backyard once, and when she cried, Greg said if she wanted to be part of the family, she had to toughen up. But the worst part wasn't even what they said. It was how they looked at her like she didn't belong there, like she was someone else's problem. Isabella didn't say a word until Molly was asleep. Then she turned to me and said flatly, "They bullied her." I nodded. "She thinks your mom hit her," she added. I knew exactly what she meant. Not a slap, something casual and mean. A push, a grab, a yank by the arm, the kind of thing a grown-up does when they're just mean enough to think no one will find out. We didn't confront them. We didn't call. We called a lawyer instead. The papers were filed within a week. We were suing my mother for neglect, emotional distress, reckless endangerment. We added my father and Greg to the report for their part and covering it up and refusing medical attention for hours. It wasn't about money. It was about making them answer for what they'd done. That was the moment everything turned. 2 days after they got the notice, my parents showed up at our house. My mom was in tears. My dad looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Greg stood behind them, arms crossed like he was guarding a fortress. "We didn't mean for any of this," my mom said. "Please, Alex, she's just a child. They say all sorts of things. You know that." I asked her which part wasn't true. She didn't answer. Then she said she'd apologize to Molly if it would make this all go away. Like that was the trade. Like our daughter's pain could be erased with a few sorrories whispered through gritted teeth. Greg didn't say much until I told them I wasn't dropping it. Then he looked me dead in the eye and said, "If that's how it's going to be, you're out of the inheritance." I stared at him. Then I laughed. Couldn't help it. I really laughed. That night, I logged into our family's joint account, the one we all had access to, supposedly for family emergencies. My father used it to remodel the deck. Greg used it for a new car. I let it slide for years, but not anymore. I pulled out my third, froze the rest with my lawyer's help. Access restricted until the suit was resolved. My phone rang for 2 straight days. Greg begged, then threatened, then tried guilt. He said he couldn't feed his family. Said he put everything into that new car and now had nothing left for bills. My dad left 3 voicemails about betrayal and disgrace sent. What would your grandfather say? I told them they'd have to figure it out. Just like Molly had to figure it out alone with a broken wrist and no one on her side. Isabella sat beside me through it all, silent. When the last message came through, she looked at me and said, "If anyone touches our daughter again, they won't have hair left to pull." I'd never seen her like this. Fierce, unforgiving. I almost didn't recognize her. And deep down, I felt something I didn't want to admit. I felt uncomfortable because I had condemned my own mother. And yet, I believed she deserved it. I didn't expect anyone to take our side. Not really. My parents were the kind of people who collected loyalty, like coins, years of hosting holiday dinners, lending out money with strings attached, showing up at every school event for Greg's kids like they were politicians on a campaign trail. Most people only saw the curated version of them. Polished, generous, in control. So, when the lawsuit became real, when it stopped being just a threat, I expected silence. Maybe a few backhanded messages. A couple of quiet blockings from relatives on social media. But that's not what happened. It started with a message from my Aunt Linda, my dad's younger sister. She hadn't spoken to me in over a year. Not since she had accidentally left Isabella out of a family invitation. She asked if we could talk. Then, she said something I'll never forget. "You're not wrong, Alex. You're just the first one who had the guts to say something." I didn't understand at first, but then she told me stories about how my mom had always been hard on me when I was a kid. how she belittled Isabella during her bridal shower, how she used to brag about Brianna being the one with real potential. Linda said she kept her mouth shut all these years because speaking up meant being cut off and no one wanted to be exiled from the family fund. Then came the cousins. Quiet messages at first, then longer ones. Several of them admitted they weren't shocked about what happened to Molly. They'd seen how she was treated at family events. Ignored, corrected for tiny things, forced to share with Brianna, while Brianna never shared back. One cousin even sent me a video from a barbecue the previous summer where Molly tried to join the other kids on the trampoline, and Greg told her to go find something quieter to do. My mom had laughed and handed Brianna a popsicle. That video sat like a stone in my stomach. All those little moments we missed, and all the people who had seen it but said nothing. But now they were speaking up and it lit a fire. My parents tried to contain the fallout. First, they tried the guilt route. My mom sent a long email about how hard parenting was in their generation and how we all make mistakes. My dad followed up with a voicemail full of fatherly disappointment and passive-aggressive sighs. Then came the soft threats. You know this lawsuit will just tear everyone apart. Are you really willing to destroy everything over one accident? I didn't reply to any of it. Greg came next alone this time. No flashy car. No smug look. Just bags under his eyes and an oversized hoodie. He didn't even knock properly. Just stood on our porch like a man who had nowhere else to go. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. He said he was sorry. Sort of said the words like someone reading a script. Then he looked at me, tried to meet my eyes and said, "You don't have to do this. We can fix it. You can be part of the family again." I asked him a question I'd been waiting to ask since the day we picked Molly up. Did Mom ever hit her? He blinked, looked away, then said, "You know how she gets when she's stressed?" Which wasn't a no. That was enough. Later that night, I went into the joint account, the one my dad insisted we all keep for family unity. It had been drained pretty low by then. Greg's new BMW, my dad's patio renovation, a business investment, and my uncle's failing vape shop. I pulled the rest of my third and locked the account down through our lawyer. Greg found out within hours. The call came at 2 a.m. He was panicked, furious, said he couldn't pay the mortgage, that he'd already stretched the last of his savings for Brianna's dance competition fees, said I was renting lives. I told him they ruined something too, just smaller, quieter, and more defenseless. The next morning, my dad left me a voicemail that lasted 4 minutes. I didn't listen to the whole thing. I caught something about betrayal and "you'll regret this" and then deleted it. But the message was clear. They were cutting me off. I was out of the will, out of the family, out of everything. I called Isabella to the kitchen and told her. She poured herself coffee, smiled, and said, "Perfect. Now we don't have to pretend anymore." Then she pulled out her phone and transferred all remaining household accounts out of joint connections, credit cards, health insurance lines, everything. She cut the final cords like she'd been waiting years for the chance. Felt like we just escaped a cult. And still, I felt it. That little twist in my gut. Not guilt exactly, but something close. The weight of what I'd done. I'd gone after my own mother. I was suing my family. But then I saw Molly that afternoon lying on the couch, sketching a fox in her notebook. She looked calm, safe, like she finally belonged somewhere. And I remembered why we started all this. When the court date finally arrived, it felt surreal. We'd been living in this in-between space for weeks. Lawyers going back and forth, documents piling up, threats from my family getting quieter, but more venomous. I wasn't sure it would actually happen. Part of me expected my mother to pull some last-minute trick, twist the narrative just enough to delay everything. But that morning, as I buttoned my shirt and watched Molly sitting on the edge of our bed, clutching her sketchbook like it was armor, I knew it was real. Isabella walked in already dressed, sharp, and cold like she'd been preparing for this since the day we picked Molly up with that cast on her arm. We arrived at the courthouse early. I hadn't been in a courtroom since jury duty 10 years ago. And even then, I just sat around waiting. This time was different. This time it was personal. We weren't spectators. We were here to end something. My mother showed up 20 minutes late. She walked in with Greg right behind her like some twisted entourage. She wore a beige coat and dark sunglasses indoors like she was someone famous avoiding paparazzi. Greg looked like he hadn't slept but still carried himself like the favorite son, the protector of the legacy. My father didn't come. Whether it was shame or arrogance, I don't know. But he stayed home. The courtroom wasn't dramatic, just quiet. Everything echoed. You could hear a pen drop. My mother didn't even look at us. She sat across the aisle, stared at the table in front of her like this wasn't happening to her. The judge was direct, no nonsense, no room for games. The case was civil but serious. Child endangerment, neglect, emotional harm. My lawyer laid it out with precision. The delayed hospital visit, the untreated fracture, the recorded call where my mother said she needs to learn to stay out of the way. Every piece added weight to the next. Then came Molly. She didn't testify formally. We didn't want to drag her through that, but her written statement was read in court by our lawyer. I watched my mother's face as the words were read. She made me eat alone in the laundry room. She said I was annoying and Brianna was more fun. She told me to stop crying because it was my own fault. I don't feel safe with them. My mother didn't flinch. Not once, but Greg. He looked down. Caught it. A flicker. Maybe regret. Maybe just embarrassment. But for the first time, he looked like someone who realized the line had been crossed a long time ago. Their lawyer tried the usual, claimed Molly was sensitive, that my mother was overwhelmed, that it was just one bad weekend. He even said, "We're talking about family, not strangers." The judge didn't bite. In the end, the judgment was clear. My mother was found liable, civilly negligent. The fine was steep, more than she ever thought she'd owe for what she called a parenting mistake. But that wasn't the worst part for her. The judge issued a restraining order. Molly was protected legally and officially. My mother could no longer contact her or come within 500 feet, no more visits. No more family events, no more pretending. It was on the record now. Public, permanent. After the ruling, my mother didn't say a word. She just stood up slowly, like someone moving through water, and walked out of the courtroom. Greg followed, but not before turning to glance at me. His face was blank, but his eyes weren't. We didn't celebrate. There was no cheering, no hugs. Just a slow walk out to the parking lot. Isabella held Molly's hand. I walked behind them, watching the two most important people in my life, wondering how we ever trusted anyone else with her. At the car, Molly asked if we could get pancakes. She said she felt hungry for the first time in days. That afternoon, we went to her favorite diner and sat in a booth by the window. Isabella smiled. Not a big smile, just enough. I watched her run a hand through Molly's hair, and I knew what she was thinking. This wasn't just a win. This was a warning. Back at home, the silence settled differently. Not heavy, not dark, just real. But I knew my parents weren't done. Not really. My father was too proud. Greg too bitter. And cutting me out of the inheritance. That was just their warm-up. They were going to come for us in their own way. They just didn't realize that we weren't scared anymore. I thought it would quiet down after the ruling. Maybe not completely, but at least enough for us to breathe. I figured my mother would retreat into the shadows. Greg would throw himself into damage control. And my dad would pretend it never happened. That's how things used to go. Ignore the rot and act like everything's polished. But I misjudged them. The real selfishness hadn't even started yet. Exactly 1 week after the verdict, my dad made a move none of us saw coming. I got an official notice from the county clerk's office. He put the family lake house up for sale. The one that had been in the family for over 40 years. The one he'd sworn would be passed down to us and our kids. The same lake house where we spent every 4th of July as kids. The one with Molly's drawings still taped to the fridge from last summer. He didn't mention it to me. Not a word. Just listed it hoping I'd be too busy with the fallout to notice. I called the listing agent directly and she confirmed he told her the family wasn't using it anymore and that he needed to liquidate assets for health expenses. It was a lie. He just wanted to make sure if I wasn't going to be a part of the family, I wouldn't get a piece of anything, not even memories. I didn't even confront him. I sent my lawyer after him instead. We had shared ownership, something he either forgot or thought I wouldn't challenge. The sale was frozen within 48 hours. Then came Greg's stunt. He announced online loudly that he was launching a family-centered GoFundMe. Claimed his daughter's dance career was being threatened because of sudden financial loss caused by a legal battle none of us wanted. He didn't name names, but it didn't take much for people to figure out who the villain in his story was. He posted a photo of Brianna in her dance uniform with a caption about how real families stick together no matter what. It was manipulative, emotional, and dripping with fake humility. But the worst part, people started donating strangers, extended relatives, old friends from high school. Some of them even left comments like, "You deserve better than betrayal." He turned our pain into his pity parade. Isabella wanted to call him out publicly. She even typed out a post, but I stopped her. Not because he didn't deserve it. He did, but because I knew this wasn't his endgame. He was trying to force us back into the role of villains to make us react, to use that as proof that we were unstable, vindictive. He wanted us angry, and I wasn't going to give him that. Instead, I gathered every screenshot, every donation note, every false statement he made and handed it to our lawyer. 2 days later, he got a cease and desist. But the silence after that was worse than anything because it meant they were planning something else. And I was right. The next bomb dropped on a Thursday evening just as we were finishing dinner. Molly was upstairs painting. Isabella was sipping tea. Then I got an email from a property attorney I didn't recognize. Greg and my dad had filed paperwork to restructure the family trust without me. The trust, originally created by my grandfather, was never about money. It was about legacy, land, documents, things with history, things meant to stay in the family. Except now they were trying to dissolve the original terms and create a new trust. One that excluded me, my wife, and my daughter entirely. The audacity was almost funny. Isabella just shook her head when I told her. Then she smiled, not out of amusement, but out of certainty. "They're cutting themselves out," she said. "They just don't realize it yet." We moved fast. Our lawyer filed an injunction, submitted documents proving bad faith, and now a judge will decide whether they can even touch the trust again. But this was never just about property or even money. It was about control. And now that they didn't have it anymore, they were lashing out like wild animals, destroying everything in hopes we'd come crawling back. They didn't realize we were never coming back. They chose their favorite. They chose their lies. And now, piece by piece, it was all unraveling. By the time the trust hearing came, we were already past the point of caring about winning. We'd won the only thing that ever mattered. Molly, her wrist had healed. Her drawings were back to filling the fridge. She started sleeping through the night again. She even asked Isabella if she could take a dance class. Her idea, not ours. That felt bigger than any verdict. Still, we showed up. My father did too. But he didn't look like the man who used to bark orders across the dinner table or puff his chest out at family gatherings. He looked smaller, like someone who had finally realized the empire he'd ruled wasn't a kingdom. It was just a house of cards. Greg sat beside him, tense, trying not to look nervous. His GoFundMe had been quietly shut down. Several donors had asked for refunds. One even emailed me to apologize for supporting such a toxic campaign. The judge reviewed everything: the unauthorized attempt to restructure the trust, the exclusion, the cease and desist violations, every move they'd made out of spite. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. He just pointed to the original terms and ruled that the trust would remain untouched. Greg and my father had overstepped. Their rights to manage the assets were permanently revoked. I was reinstated as trustee with full authority over the distribution and use of the family estate. Greg didn't even stay to hear the final words. He walked out of the courtroom without looking back. That was the official end. But the real end came quietly. A week later, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't ask for anything this time. Just said that he hoped I was happy, that he never expected to see the day his own son turned on him. Said he hoped Brianna would grow up knowing what a real family looked like. I saved the message, not for evidence, just for the reminder. We moved a few months later. Nothing drastic, just out of the old neighborhood, away from the web of passive-aggressive pity, inside glances from people who used to smile at barbecues and now didn't know what to say. The new house was quieter, smaller, but it was ours and every corner felt like peace. We didn't tell anyone we were leaving. Isabella and I packed ourselves. Molly helped tape boxes. She drew little foxes on all of them. The day we left, Isabella turned to me on the porch and said, "Never again." I nodded. I knew exactly what she meant. We changed our numbers. We kept our address private. No more holiday invites. No more pretending. We didn't need reconciliation. We needed space and peace. As for Greg and my father, well, Greg sold the BMW. His wife left him 2 months later. She took Brianna and moved back in with her parents. My dad tried to get the family fund reactivated under a new name. It didn't work. No one trusted him anymore. The family name meant nothing without control. They lost everything they built by treating Molly like she was nothing. Funny how that works. I never told Molly the full story. Just enough so she knew we believed her, protected her, and wouldn't ever let her near people who didn't. That was all she needed. She's stronger now, not harder, just sure of herself. Sometimes Isabella still brings up what happened. Usually late at night when the house is quiet and Molly's asleep. She doesn't cry. She doesn't get angry. She just says they had one job and they did, but they failed. So we moved on. We built something new. And they're still stuck in the ashes of their own selfishness. That was the last time I ever looked back. Last night, something happened that reminded me how far we've come. Molly had a school art show. Her piece, a painting of a small fox sitting under a tree at dusk, was front and center. Not because it won an award, just because her teacher said it made people stop and stare. It was quiet, thoughtful, just like her. After the show, we went out for ice cream. She asked if we could sit outside, even though it was a little cold. Isabella wrapped her coat around Molly's shoulders, and we just sat there watching her eat slowly like she was saving the moment. And then Molly said, "I like our life now. I feel safe." Isabella looked at me and I saw her eyes go glassy. Mine too, if I'm honest. It wasn't a big moment. There were no fireworks, no dramatic music, just a girl, her ice cream, and the weight we'd all been carrying finally lifting, even just a little. We're not perfect. We never will be, but we're free. And Molly is happy. After everything, that's more than enough.